Welcome to today. So this is the Delicious Art online class for adult beginners, and today's subject is this beautiful autumn tree. So it's a lovely one to do. You're either going to love it or hate it. Trees are a little bit meticulous. There's a lot of repetitive work, but it's a fun thing to do. So we're going to get cracking on that. I'm just going to mute everybody so that we've got no background noise. It's not that I don't want to hear from you, and if you do have a question or you want to ask something, please do, because that's what this is all about. It's all about, working together and learning. So that's our subject for today, and I'm just going to switch my screen over and share it so that you can see what's going on my table here. So I'll see you at the end of class. Okay, and just got to press some more buttons. Oh, was that my phone? Where did that ding come from? There we go. Go to camera, and there we are. So that's a view of my table. I'm working flat on a table, which is usually not ideal for pastels. Pastels are much better to be done on an easel or something because you get a lot of dust. You can see there's dust over here on the left hand side of my table, so I'm going to have to shake all that off later. But for the purposes of this, I need to work flat so I can get my camera to see it. But if you do have the opportunity to work on an easel, whether that's standing up or on a table, then it is a lot easier because the dust will just drop down to the bottom of your page and you haven't got to keep tipping it off and trying to get rid of it. But anyway, for the beginning of class today, we're going to start off with our charcoal drawing, and that's the usual process. And if you've got the notes there, it'll say part 1, art diary. So I've just got a little art diary here, and it's a spiral bound one with lots of drawings and stuff, from previous classes. So I just keep everything in the one place, and that way it stays reasonably clean and tidy. So for this class today, we're going to be just drawing the tree. I've said in the notes, if you want to do the background, and it is a nice background, it's quite lovely. There's like trees and a lake and stuff in the background. If you do want to focus on that or get that done, then by all means have a go. But for this class today, I just want to focus on the tree because trees seem to be a thing that a lot of people struggle with, and it's a really good thing to try to get your head around and learn to do without having to do too much work, because it's really not that hard, but it is quite time consuming. So let's just do a little charcoal sketch of the tree, and I've given you a black and white version of the photo there so that you can see it in tones. It's all about the tones and focusing on the lightest and the darkest and the mid-tones. Now you can see in the picture that the tree itself is quite black. There's not a lot of tone in there, but so that's telling me that most of these colours are a mid-tone because it's kind of all just grey, isn't it? It's like there's nothing really that stands out except for the dark tree trunk and a few little light leaves scattered around in there, which is going to be a great clue for later on when we want to pop the highlights in at the end. But at this point, we kind of, need to look at that and just determine what kinds of tones are in this and how are we going to illustrate those with our colours. But first, let's focus on the drawing. So what I normally like to do is just draw up a thumbnail, they call it. Now, thumbnails are usually only as big as your thumb. They're little, usually. So artists often, when they're composing a painting, they'll do lots of little thumbnails. And that way, you can put the tree further to the left or the right or add the background or not. And so thumbnails are a great way to kind of find different compositions and things that, you might want to include or not include in your painting. So and it's also a little, sketch of, say, with people or something. I'm terrible at people. That's not true. I never do them, so I don't know. but you can, you know, have a bit of a play with thumbnails and just do quick little sketches, and it gets you familiar with the picture that you want to do. But I like to, for this purpose anyway, for these classes, I like to just do about that size and nearly fill a page, so that we're rehearsing our picture for the day. So let's start with a rectangle. It's about the same proportions as your page. And you can see on the coloured picture or printout, I've got a grid line on there. So I've just marked in the halfway marks. And that's just a line down the middle and a line across the middle, so that you've got a cross mark in the middle. And it just helps us find things within the picture. So if I didn't have that there, I'd probably put the tree bang in the middle, because it looks like it's in the middle when you first glance at it. But if you look at the colour version and where the grid line is, you can see that the tree is actually on the left-hand side of that mark. So those things are important just to help you notice where things sit within the picture and get used to drawing. So I like to put things slightly off centre as well. I could have banged it in the middle, but I thought, no, I'll just move it over a little bit because it makes it a bit more interesting. So first thing we want to draw in is the ground or the grass under the tree, and just looking at where the grid line is and where that sits within relation to the bottom of your picture. How far up from the base is it, and what shape is it in? So the ground in front of the tree is like a little hill. It's not a very pronounced hill, but there's definitely a little slight rise there. And so that's going to be our grass or dirt or ground. And that will be the only other thing that we're going to paint in here today. So as I said, we're going to not bother with the background. It's fun to do because it's got all those beautiful reflections and things. And if we find time at the end of class, maybe we'll kind of have a bit of a look at that. But for this purpose, we'll just do the tree. So what I've done there is I've put a little mound in where the ground is, and then I'm going to put my tree trunk in slightly to the left of my centre mark, and just draw that in lightly with your charcoal. When you hold your charcoal, I've got a thin, longish piece of charcoal here. I like to hold it at the end and just keep it fairly loose. So if you hold it tight like a pencil or a pen, you'll find you get really too tight and you don't relax. So I like to just keep it quite loose in my hand. So what I'm going to do now is look at the branches in this tree, and you really can't see a whole lot, but I can see that it's really dark up in here in the middle. And so we're looking at tones, we're looking at the light and the dark. And in this black and white picture, this tree trunk is quite dark, isn't it? And then it kind of comes up into the center area there, and it gets really dark. And you can see that that's because of all the branches are kind of branching out in that center section. So what I'm going to do is just mark in some dark areas there and blacken that off a bit. Now there is light at the base of that tree and also on the grass in front of it, and we can whiten that up. If you've got a kneadable eraser and you've already put some charcoal down, you can always take some off with your eraser. I'm just putting some shadow on the ground as well. We could do that later, but we'll pop it in now while we're down here. And so that gives us a really nice feeling of where the light's coming from. And that's what this picture is all about, really. It's just the light, the direction of the light and the beautiful colours. So I can see that the light's hitting the grass on this left bit. So we'll leave that bit white or light. Okay, so we've marked that in, put some shadow in there, and then coming up into the tree. So now I'm just going to kind of pull my charcoal out in the direction of those branches. So I can see, it's hard to see, but they're kind of these black lines that come out, and I've gone too high there. So they should come below the halfway line. And then we've got all the little kind of twig shapes that come out from there, and they hang down. So you can see them all crisscrossing if you look closely beyond the leaves. So you've got to kind of look behind all those and see all the detail of the branches coming from that main branch on the right-hand side there. And what I'm doing is I'm just doing light crisscrossy little lines. You don't have to get all of these in exactly the right spot because it's a tree. And so trees are always slightly different from each other, aren't they? It's like people, we've all got a different face. So even though our basic structure is the same, we've all got, most of us, the blessed ones, have 2 eyes, a nose and a mouth and 2 ears, and they're all in around about the same place, but everyone has slightly different features. And it's the same thing with trees and flowers and things in nature. So it doesn't matter if you don't get your branches in exactly the right place, as long as they're, you know, thereabouts. And the main thing is just to get a feel for the shapes and how big this tree is. So you can see that it comes almost over to the right-hand side of our picture, and we can still see some background through that right side there. I'll have to rub some out, went too far. But on the left side, it goes all the way to the edge. It literally touches the edge of the picture. So we've got beautiful leaves all the way over here on the very side. And so that's kind of nice. It just makes a picture a little bit more interesting if you have a little bit kind of going off to the side and disappearing, or bleeding off, I call it, off the side of something off the edge of your page. It's kind of, just makes it more interesting, I think, rather than just putting it all in the middle and having it equal, you know, on all sides. What I'm doing now is I'm just drawing some of the lines of the branches that I can see. So if you look at your either version, black and white or your colour version, you can see there's quite a few dark lines where all the branches come sort of sprouting out, I guess, from the centre. I don't know what kind of tree this is, but it's really pretty. Love autumn trees. Love all those beautiful colours, your reds and yellows and so forth. And so when you want to do a thicker branch or something, you know, a main branch, just press a little bit harder and make the line a bit wider. What I'm doing is kind of letting the charcoal wander over the page and just, you know, branching out lightly from the main branches so that you get a finer mark, because we just want to kind of suggest these marks. Once we pop leaves over the top of all of these, they get a little bit lost, and the leaves will sit in front of most of this. But we've still got to get the foundations in there. We've still got to put the bones in, basically, and give the leaves something to hang off. Otherwise, they'll just be floating around in nowhere. So you can see at the top of the tree, the very top there, there's not much as far as foliage goes. It's mostly sort of bearish branches, a few little bits of leaves here and there, and then it gets thicker as it comes down. So that's interesting. And again, notice the shape and how far from the edge of your page the tree finishes and starts and so forth. And it's such a lovely shape because it kind of all comes out from the middle. And I'm literally not following the exact direction of all these branches because I can't really see them that well, but you can just tell, you know, some sort of go more horizontal than others kind of go more upwards. So just vary the direction as you put them in there. Lovely. And the other thing to be, you know, think about, I guess, is how do you get the leaves that are sitting in the front, so closest to us, pointing towards us? How do you get them to look like that? And it's really just about the tones and the lights and the darks. So the leaves that are catching the light, or, you know, the little golden leaves or the brightest ones on the black and white picture, you can see those, they've got little white light spots. They're the guys that are poking out the most because they've got to be catching the light. The light's coming from the left side towards the right. And I can tell that because of where the shadow of the tree sits on the grass. And you've got all that beautiful light grass on the left. And so that means that the leaves that are kind of sticking out closest to us in the front area there. So in the middle there's a few little light spots. We haven't put leaves in yet. And then over on the right, there's a few spots here that kind of just must be poking out further. So they're catching the light. And then there's lots of them on the left-hand side because that's obviously where the light's coming from. So that's catching all the light. And that's how you can kind of give things depth by determining the direction of light and then figuring out the tone. That's why tone is so important. Okay, so now we're going to start to just mark in some leaves. If you have a shorter, stumpy bit of charcoal, like this little short, fat one, you might find that a little bit easier. It depends on how you use your charcoal. But essentially what we want to do is just some little, I'm using my long stick to show you what I'm talking about, just some little like squiggly blobs like this where you can see leaves. So, and because most of this is a mid-tone or a similar sort of tone, we can just, you know, dab these around, and then where we want to get some light back in with the charcoal, we can take it out again with the eraser. So I'm just doing little squiggly marks like this. I'm using the end of the charcoal. If you're finding that too tedious, and this does get tedious, I have to admit, so you have been warned. If you find that tedious, then you might be happier to use a shorter stump of charcoal like this one. And then what I do is just kind of lie it down on its side and then wiggle it around. Same sort of process, but I seem to be able to cover a larger area because it's a chunkier piece. And so by doing that and varying the way you move your hands, so I'm going to twist it around and get different directions with this bit of short piece, and see how that kind of, it's a bigger mark and it fills up more space. So you could do either, you could do a bit of both really, and we will when we do the pastels. So we're going to have lots of different gestures, I suppose you want to call them, of how to, you know, spread this out and how to get the pastel onto the paper and get that feeling of leaves, because this is really just clusters of colour. And so by doing these little squiggly things, I'm filling up where all the leaves sit. But you can also see gaps where you can still see some of the branches. So we want to leave some of those showing too. But in other spots, you want to fill them up and cover them in and hide them, because we want all those leaves to sit in front of those branches. So it's just about looking at your picture and figuring out where is everything sitting. The other thing to consider are sky holes. So they're the gaps that you can see between the leaves and the branches of whatever's behind it. In this instance, it's mountains in the distance, but most times it's sky. And so that's another important thing to kind of leave in, if you can, is just to leave some spaces for the sky. In this instance, it'd just be white paper, because that's what we're working on. And we're just working black and white, so there's not a whole lot of colour options. But this is just a great little exercise to get familiar with the shape and really study the branches and the shapes and watch which direction they run in, and where all the sky holes are, and where the leaves might be thicker, for instance. So they're kind of thicker in towards the centre, aren't they? And then they get wispier and thinner out towards the outside. And running around down the side here, so I'm again trying to twist my bit of charcoal around in my hand and change the direction that I'm pulling it in, because that will give me that lovely organic kind of shapes that I'm trying to get to make all these leaves. So it's really about just being quite loose and relaxed with it. You don't want to be sitting there painting every single little leaf. It'll take you years and years, and we haven't got years and years. Good show though, if you've ever seen it, on SBS. So anyway, back to this. Down in the bottom here on the right, see how it's quite sparse? So you can see a lot more of the branches through there, and there's only a few kind of little leaves on the ends. So that's interesting. That means, you know, our tree's not going to be the same all over. It's got a little bit of variation in its structure. And so, you know, you can kind of leave some of those little branches showing through, and then not have as thick a cluster of leaves as we have on the left side. So on the left side, there's a little bit more foliage, isn't there? It's not quite as sparse on that side. And you can kind of see all these little branches crisscrossing over. So that makes it a little bit more interesting too. So we'll continue with this for a couple more minutes, and then I want to get stuck into the colour version. When you get to the tips of the branches where there's a few sparse leaves, you could, kind of dot your charcoal. I might swap over now to my other piece because I want to use the end and get some smaller marks. And so using different sized charcoals or pastel sticks will give you different outcomes, of course. It's a little bit like using paintbrushes, really. You have different sized brushes and different shapes to do different marks and gestures and so forth. And notice the shape of this. I've actually gone a bit too high, or maybe I didn't draw my page the right size, but there's less at the top. And we've got this lovely thick kind of almost round section of leaves on the left-hand side. So they come down fairly low, and it's sort of a nice round shape on there. And then we've got a few coming off to the edge of the page. On the other side, on the right, so we've got not much in the top there. And then we've got this little branch that kind of pops up on the top right, and then it dips down. And then we've got this shape of the branch coming out. So what I'm saying is it's kind of this shape, and it's always good to look for shapes in things. So when you see the shapes, you can kind of work out how far out that branch needs to go, or where those leaves need to sit. And then it kind of comes up here and has this big branch at the top that peeks out, and then it dips down again. And then we have not much in the centre, and then it sort of rounds out a bit more on the left. So noticing shapes like that will help you get things in the right spot. And then if I've mucked it all up now because I drew a line around it. But then if you want to get your light back in, for instance, on the trunk of the tree, so on the left side there, and then down in towards the grass, because that's where the light's shining. It's really bright and beautiful on the left side of the trunk there. And so that's going to give us really nice, contrast from shadow to light through there. So it's not, probably could be a bit lighter, but that's where the light sits. And then we've got the light on the grass here. And that's going to be so much fun to do in colour, because we can use beautiful yellows and things to get that limey green, bright grass. And then if you wanted to, if you've got quite a thick foliage, you could then start to sort of dab it. Check your black and white picture. It's probably not going to work so well because we're on white paper, to get the little bits of light back in the leaves there. But essentially you can dab it with your kneadable eraser. I'm making a little point each time with my eraser and just dabbing it, and it's taking some of the charcoal out and creating some little light spots, and that's where the sun's shining on those leaves. And most important to do it probably in the middle area here, where you've got a few of those leaves that were sticking out far enough to catch the light. And so by putting them in the middle and kind of overlapping the tree trunk, it's hopefully going to bring those leaves forward and look like they're closer to us. I haven't got it thick enough to let the white really do anything. But that's the first part of today's class, and it's just a little quick exercise to get familiar with the picture, look at the shapes and the tones and so forth, and just start to really think about that stuff. And doing this is a great way to rehearse something. So whenever you're planning to do a painting or a drawing or whatever, it's good to do a little quick sketch like this with charcoal, just to find your way around and get familiar with it. And essentially you could do it in charcoal only if you wanted to. It's always a fun exercise just to work in black and white and really focus on the tones. So we're going to finish up this section of the class and then I will, and then we'll start doing the coloured version. I'll just pull my screen out a little bit more, that's better. And so I think I did send through the colour swatches for this one, and they are over here. It's good doing the swatches because it makes me get organised the day before, which is very good. So thank you, Karen, for the suggestion. I'm going to pop my charcoal tree away now. So I'm just going to close up my book and put that away for next time. Always good to have a little sketchbook handy somewhere. And so these are the colours that we're going to use today. Now, I reserve the right to grab more out of my colour box as we go if you feel like it. But it's always good to start somewhere, isn't it? And have a base palette to begin with. So this is what I've picked based on the colours in the tree. So what I've got is a phthalo green. That's this beautiful dark green. It's lovely. It's super dark, and you just have to have a phthalo green in your set. You can't not. So that's a wonderful one to have. I have a mid green as well because there's quite a lot of green in this picture. It's mostly, you know, underneath, but there's definitely some greens in there. So that's going to be my mid green, and also in the grass down the bottom. Then I've got my lime green, so that's just delicious, so bright and yummy. I love this colour. So that's going to be really nice for the sunshine on the grass, and also some of those brighter leaves in there to catch the light. Brown is the next one, so I've got that in there for the tree trunk and the tree branches, and a little bit on the grass here in the shadow. There's a bit of dirt or brown in there, so we can use that through there. And then I've got purple. So purple is a wonderful colour for shadows, so don't ever discount purple. I can actually see quite a lot of purple in this image, and it's going to really give it some depth. So we're going to put some purple in there as well. I've got quite a lot of colours today. Normally I try and limit it to 5 or 6, but there's just so many in here I couldn't stop. I've got terracotta as well, so that's like a lighter brown. And so again, that's going to be nice for some of the orangey brown effects, and maybe also a little bit in the tree trunk and the dirt. I've got a red, because I can see lots of red in there, beautiful red autumn colours. I've got a pinky red as well, because that to me seems to be some of those leaves that are catching the light, the red leaves catching the light. So it's got this beautiful pink sort of glow. Orange, because there's heaps of orange. A golden yellow, which is between yellow and gold, orange, sorry. That's a lovely colour. And then bright yellow. So that's what I've got for now. I haven't included white. We may not need it. If we do, we can grab it. But I think I want to try and keep this fairly warm if I can. And white often makes things appear cooler. So sometimes I prefer not to have any white and just keep it to the yellows. The other option would be to find a very pale yellow that looks nearly white, and that would be lovely for some really light lights. So that's the palette. And if you've got yourself organised before class, you might have that ready to go. Otherwise, grab those colours now and put them into something like this, a little box or something separate to keep it away from all your other ones. And that'll just, save you from getting confused. If you don't get this finished today and you want to come back tomorrow, you've still got your palette sitting there and you know exactly what you've used and what you haven't. So I find that really, really helpful. So I've got lots of these little boxes lying around with different palettes for different paintings. If they have lids, it's even better because you can pop them away if you need to. So that's that. And you want your reference picture close by. I've also got it next to me on an iPad, so that's helpful too. You can zoom in on there and look at things closely. I mentioned paper colour. What did I say? Purple, dark blue, mid-grey or terracotta. Don't know about terracotta. Might be a bit too orange, but if that's all you've got, then we'll run with it. What I did pick out was this blue. So it's a dark blue. And I think that will be nice because because of all the bright oranges and yellows, and blue and orange are a complementary blend. So it's always beautiful to put orange with blue. And I thought, if we're not filling a background in, then I want something a little darker that's going to highlight.
Ask a question?
Yeah.
I've got two colours, but this one's a bit, that's not really purple. It's more of a black.
Yeah.
And I'm planning on going back and doing the background. So should I use that one, or do I go with the lighter background?
The background is fairly light, isn't it? So probably the lighter one if you're going to go in and do the background. My only concern about doing the background will be getting in behind the trees afterwards. It can get tricky. Yeah. So if I wasn't doing the background, I'd go darker. So they're kind of your two choices, really. But if you do want to tackle it, then, yeah, go for the light and see how you go. Have a crack at it. Be brave. Yeah, why not? You've got lots of options, you know, with pastel paper. They come in all sorts of colours. I really like that aubergine purple one that Michelle had. It's lovely. And but yeah, I'm a fan of dark paper. I really like working on the darks. It's just me. Not everybody likes that. So it's personal choice. But, you know, my thought was I want my oranges and my yellows and my reds to really stand out, and they're going to on this dark paper. So up to you. That, you know, if you want to pop the background in, then by all means go for it. It's just it's going to be tricky, and when you do that, you'll have to, like, we'll do the tree, then you'll have to put the background in around it, and then you'll have to do more tree just to kind of clean up the edges and make sure that you haven't got background overlapping the tree. So as long as you're happy to do that, then that'll be fine. Lots of people put backgrounds in last. I prefer to do it the other way around, but either way is fine. And it is a lovely background. It's nice, and it's quite...
Well, now I'm scared.
Don't be scared. It'll be all right. It'll be all right. It'll just take you a lot longer. So if you've got all day and all weekend, that's cool. Very cool. We could have done the background today, but I think it would just take up too much of the time, and I wanted to focus on the tree, just so that you could experience what that's like. So yeah. All right, let's get cracking. First thing we need is a board. Where did I put my board? There it is. So your board is the thing that you want to tape your paper down onto. I'm going to move my palette and everything aside now. If you need to see the colours again, just let me know. And if you're watching the video, you can just press pause. That's the beauty of the videos. So what I like to do, because I'm working flat, I can just tape down the corners of this bit of paper and keep it on my board. If you are working on an easel or you're upright, then you might want to tape it all the way around. And if you do that, then make sure your tape's not too sticky. So you just want to kind of pat it onto your tablecloth or your clothing or somewhere, just to get some of that adhesive off, because it is quite sticky and it can tear, because this is literally just paper. And sometimes when you take it off, especially if it's on there for, you know, a week or two, it can tear the paper. And other times it can actually tear onto your painting. So you've got to be a little bit careful. I just like to get some of the stickiness off before I put it down. It's supposed to be 14-day tape or something, but it still does tear paper. Okay, so on the corners is fine if you're working flat. It just means you don't have to hold it down all the time, and you've got a spare hand if you need it for anything else. Okay, so we've got that set up, and the next thing we need to do is just pop the grid mark on there. And it's just a simple grid mark today. It's just halfway lines. What I'm going to use is a light pencil. This is a white charcoal pencil, or you could use a pastel pencil. So that's a pastel pencil. It's a pale lemony colour. or something light, or dark if you're on light paper. So just figure out which one's going to work best for you. You don't need to press very hard for this because we just really want to lightly mark in our lines so we can find where things sit. So I don't press very hard at all because later on I want to take it off. And if you press really hard, the paper just hangs onto it because it's so gritty, and it's really difficult to get pastel and things off if you've pushed hard and made a really hard line or mark. So I just press very lightly like that. So it's just enough so you can see it to get things in place, and then we can rub it out with your kneadable eraser. Okay, so next thing we do, once we've got the grid mark drawn in, is the same process as we just did with the charcoal. So we're just going to draw in our little mound or hill, bit of grass there. I like to bring mine up a little bit higher just because I want some more drama in the bottom there, because we can really emphasize that bright green grass, and it's so gorgeous. So I want to have a little bit more of that. So I'm going to make my hill a bit higher, which means my tree will probably end up shorter. But I like the idea of getting all that beautiful light in this section here, because that's just going to glow. And yeah, they're the things I love best, brights and darks. So next we want to, using the same pencil, just sketch in a very light outline of your tree. So remember, it's just off to the left of our centre mark, and it kind of comes down, and you've got those roots going into the ground. So we've got that beautiful arch at the bottom of the tree. The left side is slightly higher than the right, so it's a little bit different each side. And that's what you want to try and do, is make sure that you include, you know, the differences between each side, so they're not exactly the same. So now I'm just going to lightly mark in a few branches. We're not going to put a lot in because we'll have to go over it with darks in a minute. And essentially just do a very soft line around the shape of the tree. So I don't know if you can see that on the screen. I'm trying to keep it really light because I'm going to need to take it out later, rub it out. But just tracing around kind of the shape of the tree, just so you give yourself a bit of an idea of where everything needs to go. And so you can see below on the right side over here, most of those, that, you know, we've got that big branch that comes out there, and then it dips in again, and then we've got that little peak on the top right, and then it sort of flattens out a little bit across the top, and then we've got the left side. So you just need a very loose sort of shape around there. And I think, yeah, I'm just looking at the level of the branches and leaves on each side of the tree. They're about even, but you might go a little bit lower on the right just to make it a bit more interesting. So that's essentially the basic shape of the tree that I want to put in. And that's probably all we need to do with the pencil. So pop your pencil aside and we'll start marking in some darks. I can't believe I didn't pick up blue violet. That's my favourite dark, so I've just got to go and grab one of those. If you haven't got yours there, then grab that. If you don't have a blue violet, get a black or something really dark. So blue violet is usually very crumbly. It's a very soft colour. It looks black. I hope that's not black. Let me check. Oh, it is. Okay, we'll put that in my palette for later in case I want black. Let me see. This is blue violet, okay? So it's not as black, but it's got this beautiful purple kind of base. So it's beautiful for shadows. Now that's the thing we're going to use to block in some of the darks on here. So we're going to go loose at first, and we're just going to block in colour, and then as we work towards the end, we'll be doing a little bit more detail and sort of dotting stuff to make those leaves and put all those colours in there. But first up, we're just going to mark in where it's darkest, and again, not looking at the background. So I can see the tree trunk is dark, so we can fill most of that in with this, and just go lightly. You don't need a lot because it is such a strong colour. And then we've got shadow. See over there on the right hand side of the grass, that's in shadow, so we want to get a bit of dark in there. We'll come over this with green and other things afterwards, but we just want to mark in where the shadow is. And then, you know how with the charcoal we did the little branches and all the little lines and things? We want to start doing some of that. So same with this, or black, whatever you've got. If you're on a light paper, then charcoal would work, because charcoal and pastels play nicely together. So see how I'm just gently marking in some of those dark areas I can see, the branches. And as I said, don't go too heavy, and try to kind of break your lines a little bit. So because there's leaves and branches and things sitting in front and behind and all over the place, we can't actually see any full lines of the branches, can we? They're all kind of broken because they've got things in front of them. So what we want to do is keep that in mind, but still press pretty light to get some light marks on there. So we're just going to hint at these kind of branch shapes on the page. And if you look closely, you can see some of the branches have actually got a light side on them. They're kind of catching the light up on the right side. So just up in here on the right hand side, you can see that there's a couple of branches there that have a lighter edge to them, and that'll be where the sun's hitting them. We'll sort that out after, but just notice those things, because that's important. We can pop some light in there later on, and that will really give it a nice little highlight. So I'm literally just drawing some loose branches in, like we did with the charcoal. And you know, those ones up at the top, they kind of go all the way to the top. Oh, I'm too far over to the left. Keep checking your centre mark, which I didn't do. And little branches up around there. So they're all scraggly. They're kind of bare up at the top, aren't they? Obviously the leaves must be falling. Reminds me of Canberra. Grew up in Canberra, and I really miss those beautiful autumn colours. I still love the trees. Stunning. Don't get that up here in Queensland so much. It's either palm trees or brown. So very lightly, and what I'm doing is I'm doing this, I'm kind of rolling the pastel. So I've got a fairly new stick here, and it's got a reasonably sharp end on it. So it's filthy, it's getting all over me. But when I'm pulling it down and getting some of those branches, you know, lines in there, just especially around here around the base, because there's not as much foliage on the bottom branches on the right there. What I do is I'm kind of rolling the pastel as I'm drawing with it. And what that's doing then is creating this uneven sort of line. And so you're not getting just one hard, solid mark that's the same width all the way. You're just creating these sort of random, more organic, I guess, lines. And it's just about keeping it really loose in your hand. And see, I'm kind of rolling it. And so that varies the width a little bit, and you just get these beautiful, more natural looking lines than you would if you're just doing these big, you know, hard marks. So just kind of pull it around lightly, gently, gently. We've got a few of those in, and we can touch up a few of those as we go if we lose them. So that's basically the skeleton of the tree. And remember too, some of the branches are coming towards us, aren't they? So I'm going to do some in kind of that direction. It just breaks up the feeling that it's sort of just sprouting out to the sides rather than all around. There. So that's my basic skeleton shape. What I want to do now is just take out that white mark, or as much as you can, or your pencil line, and maybe your grid mark if it's on the outside of the tree. If it's inside, we'll just probably fill it all in and you won't see it. But that little shape that I drew before, I just want to remove that so that it doesn't look a bit silly at the end. Most of it will probably cover up, but some of these end branches that don't have many leaves might not cover it, so just keep it, take it out. If you've drawn very lightly, it'll be easy to get off. So that's why you've got to go light. And of course, when we pop leaves in, it'll just all get lost anyway, but it's good to get rid of some of it now if you can. And so now I've got my skeleton of my tree. I've got my base shape because I drew that in earlier, and I could, you know, take my branches out in the shape that the tree is. And I've still got white around the edges of my tree and my grass here, but I'll cover all that up as we move forward. Lovely. So what I might do is we're going to pop a bit of colour onto the tree trunk, the browns, and start to kind of work on that and the grass area. So we'll do that, and we'll put a bit of colour into the trunk, and then we might have a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and get stuck into the rest of it. So let's get some grass down on here. Now, like I said before, if you've got a phthalo green, that's that lovely dark green. Let's pop a bit of that down here on the right-hand side. So I'm just looking at where the shadow is. I know we put dark there before, and that's our foundation colour, I guess, to start building on. And what I want to do now is get a bit of this dark green in there. So I'm just using the pastel on its side again and just pulling it across like that. So I want to create a shadow on that side, and you can see it kind of comes all the way over to here. I'm not going to leave that dark. I'm going to kind of put a bit more of my mid-green into there. But that's basically the shape of it, isn't it? And then there's a little bit just on the left bottom of the tree as well, just in there. So because that must be shadow from the tree onto the grass there on that side. Lovely. And now I'm going to pick up my mid-green. So that's this mid colour that I picked. So it's not my brightest, it's my mid. What I'm trying to do is leave some of the, like the area where I want to put the brightest limey green, I've left that uncoloured because what I want is to be able to get pure colour down on there and not be kind of contaminated by colour underneath it. Whereas in the other area over here where the dark is, I don't mind that I've got my blue violet there, and then I'm going to pop my green over the top. So that's pretty much where I want to put my mid-green. And then I'm going to blend that in a little bit with my fingers. I've just got a little hand towel here. If you have a little towel and wet one end of it, you'll be able to kind of wipe your fingers sort of clean, not entirely, but just enough to get the pigment off your fingers so that then when you put them back in to your artwork, they're not going to be dirty. So what I want to do now is just very lightly pull that across, and I'm pulling it horizontally because that's the way the shadow is falling. So when you're painting something, always think about the direction that the thing is in. I know that sounds weird, but you know, this has got these beautiful long shadows across the grass there. So that's the direction I want to pull this in, so that we kind of pull the greens together and start to create this lovely feeling of afternoon shadows. You can see how that's kind of blended across really nicely on the grass there. And if you want to, you can pull your finger up into the tree trunk as well and push some of that into. I'm just going to mush that around a little bit. And I'll come back to that with some brown and stuff in a minute. Cool. Lovely. And so now we want to, let's get some sunshine on this grass. This is my beautiful limey green. If you don't have a lime green, you can always put, for instance, I'll show you, you could put down your mid green. So this is the green I just used before for my mids. I know it's not lime, but I'm going to add yellow over it. So if you don't have a colour in your palette that you want, like a lime green, and it's really hard to get a really beautiful lime green. Green's a tricky colour. So I can put my mid green down like that, and then I can get a yellow, put it over the top, and mix them together on the paper. And that's how you can create your lime green. Beautiful. And then all you've got to do is give your fingers a wipe, and we want to push it in a little bit. So rather than mixing your colours on a palette or somewhere, you do it here. And I can pull that across like that. And if you lose your edges and it all gets a bit dirty and blurry, just come back in with more yellow and brighten it up. Wow, that's glowing. It's probably nicer than my lime green. So then I can come back in with yellow and add some more shine just on the edge like that, because that's where the sun's catching it and it's lovely. And pull that through softly. So that's how you can create a beautiful limey colour. I'm going to put, see on the right hand side, there's a little bit of a limey green over there as well. So that might be a bit of a hill that's catching the light. Pop a bit of that there. I'll put yellow down first and then the mid green over it, just because I wanted it to be a little bit, not quite as strong as the other one. But this is how you can kind of make colours. You just mix them on the paper. You can add, a bit more yellow if you want it to be brighter. Pull that across. Maybe you just want to pull it across once so that you don't keep, the more you blend and stick your fingers in there, the dirtier something's going to get. So if you've got a really nice bright colour like that, you don't want to keep pushing it in because it just gets muddy again and then you lose it. And then you've got to put more on. And then you get to the point where it won't let you because there's only a certain amount of pastel you can get on before it's full. So when you get to this bright stage like here, that's when you want to kind of not blend it in. You've got to let it sort of sit on the surface. If you don't like the look of it, then just pull it lightly in one direction and then lift up and don't put your fingers back in. So it's a bit of toing and froing and a bit of fiddling around. And if you're sitting flat like I am at a desk, then you're going to end up with a fair bit of dust on your page. And I've got, the edge of the grass there where I want it to be nice and sharp. It's gone all blurry because I've sort of smudged it a bit, but I can hopefully get some of that off with my kneadable eraser or smudge it and make it worse, one of the two. But if I pull that across there like that, and then see how the eraser picks up all the pigment, if I put that back down, it's just going to make more mess. So then I've got to knead it, push it in, and then pull it across again until you've got a nice clean spot. So you have to keep kind of kneading the eraser to find a clean edge. So that's one way of making lime green, is just mixing your mid green with your yellow, and it's amazing what you can make when you mix colours. So with that theory in mind, let's add a bit of yellow to this tree trunk, because see on the left hand side there's a bit of light there. I know that's too bright. I'm going to push it in and quieten it down. And that's the nice thing, isn't it? You just can kind of muck around with it a little bit and push the colour in and make new colours. That's the fun part. So I've got some yellow on there. What I'm going to do now is get my brown and just put some of that over the top. I want to brown off this tree trunk a little bit. And so sometimes you don't need to blend. You can just let the colour sit on the top, and it'll help to tell us about the texture too. So I've put some of that over that yellow. It's still looking fairly light, which is nice, but now I've got the brown in there, so we're starting to feel like it's got some kind of a woody texture to it. I'm also going to pop a bit of that brown over here on the grass, just in that shady bit, because I can see some dirt or something in there. So I want to kind of do that while I've got it in my hand. So sometimes you've got to kind of travel around your picture, you know, pick up your brown and think, where else can I put this? Where else do I see brown? And pop it wherever you see it. So I'll stop for a break in a sec, and so that'll give you a chance to catch up. My tree's looking a bit crooked, I think. I'll have to expand this bit here. And then, because I've lost some of the light on the side there with the brown over it, I'm just going to push this in a tiny bit to quieten it down. And then you can come back again with, I might try the terracotta actually, and lighten up that side a little bit over the yellow. So now it becomes like an orange with a yellow base, which helps it to be lighter. So see how that just gives it a bit of a shine? And so now we can see where the sun's catching on this. And remember, it's on the left, so it's catching on that left side there. And if I want to put more shadow in there, I can always pick up my brown or my blue violet again and get some more shadows in there, because I can see some ridges through there, little dark bits. So your blue violet's going to be nice to get some more dark back in there. I like mucking around with this sort of thing. There we go. So now I can see how that tree trunk is catching the light, isn't it? And the good thing is, if we get to the end and you feel like you want to brighten it up even more, we can. We can add some yellow or even a bit of off-white or cream or something to give it a bit more shine. And I've got some dust on there, so I'm going to tip that off. There we go. And then just at the base of the tree, I can just fiddle around in there a little bit and ooze that into the grass. And again, come back over the grass if you want to brighten that up even more with a bit of yellow or lime green, whatever you've got, to get that beautiful bright sunshine on there. This will all look better once it's done. You know, it looks a bit weird now because we've got this bare tree with no leaves and this crazy green sunny grass. But once we get the leaves in and get light in there, it's going to start to make more sense. That's quite lovely. So, as promised, I think we'll take a 10-minute break. So that'll give you a chance to catch up if you haven't got to this point yet, or go have a drink or something. And we'll come back at, what is it now, 2:11. So we'll come back at 2:20 and we'll get stuck into those leaves. It'll be delicious. If you're enthusiastic and want to get started, then just start doing this kind of thing at the side of your pastel, smushing it around. Isn't that red beautiful? And again, vary the direction that you smush it in and leave some sky holes in there. Leave some spaces so we can see through the leaves as well. Okay, cool. I shall see you shortly. Okay, so I am back and we're ready to rock and roll. Just make sure everybody's there. Okay. Nearly everybody's there. So I'll carry on anyway. And we'll get stuck into these leaves and get some colour on here. So as I said before I left, if you just want to sort of smudge some colour around, so what we need to do is just build up the volume, I suppose, of the leaves and really start to get some density going on, but only where it's actually thick, where you can see them. So what I'm going to do is just smudge some of this red around, and I can see a lot more red on the left than on the right. The right side seems to be a bit more sparse and probably not quite as bright. Now the reason for that obviously is that the light's coming from that left side. So keep that in mind when you're popping your colours on. And I can see I'm already making patterns, you see, because I'm holding the pastel in the same direction and I'm doing the same movement. So you kind of got to twist it around a little bit and maybe lift your shoulder or twist your arm. If you're standing up, you know, just move your hand around. Try to vary those movements a little bit because you don't want to make patterns. This is an organic subject, so we want to try and keep it as natural as possible. So I've got some red on there, and then I'm going to pop a bit of green in as well. So this is the mid-green that I had on the grass, and I can see quite a bit of green in there. And again, I'm just going to go lightly. So I'm actually not using the whole stick, even though it's quite a decent sized stick. I'm just kind of, I tilt it a little bit towards one end so that one end is touching the paper. The other end is not so much, but I'm still getting a lovely soft mark. If I tip it up like this and use the edge of it, then I'm going to get harder, more defined marks, and I don't want to do that at this stage. So I just want to keep my marks or my coverage fairly soft, gentle, and blurry, I guess. So I'm just going to dab this around where I can see some green, and again try to, you know, move the pastel and change your direction a little bit. It's quite strategic, this. You think, oh, you know, I'm just going to put leaves on branches, but you have to really focus on where those clusters of colour are, and make sure you don't put it down too heavy, you know, because you still want to be able to see a little bit of the background through the leaves. And there's little sky holes here and there. So sky holes are the bits of sky that you can see through the trees or the leaves. Now down at the bottom here, see on the bottom right, we've got those very sparse branches kind of hanging down, but there's still a fair bit of foliage at the ends of those. So I'm just going to put a few soft little marks down through the base of those there. Just keep it really soft. A little bit more down there. So you just want to go lightly, lightly. What you don't want to do is put too much colour down too soon, because then you can't get more over it. So this is all about layering and not actually blending. So we're not going to get our fingers into this because we want to keep it all fairly open and loose and to sit on the surface. So that's enough green. And I'm going to dance between these colours. So we're going to pick up red again afterwards and probably a little bit more green. And then we'll put a few more branches in with the darks and so forth. So we're going to kind of work in layers, but we're alternating between things all the time. So I call it dancing between colours or dancing between layers, because that's what it feels like. It's kind of, you know, you do a bit of this and you do a bit of that and you just keep kind of alternating. So what colour can we use now? I might pick up the terracotta. I'm kind of working from my mids up to my lights. So the terracotta is a mid, you know, orange colour. And so I'm just going to start to patch that on a little bit. So as we're building it up, I just want to do smaller little marks. I still don't want to dot it because then, you know, it's far too much detail. We don't want to do too much detail at this point. I just want to kind of smush it around lightly. And if you have soft pastels, you'll find they'll hold on to the paper really nicely. So just gently, gently pushing that around, blending, blending. Make sure you pop leaves, you know, in front of your tree trunk as well, because they're pointing towards us. So you still need to have some foliage in the middle, or, you know, coming from the center out towards us. So see how that's just gently, gently building up the tones and the colors. And then when you get, for instance, up on this right-hand side, so we've got some sparse kind of branches there, and most of the foliage there looks like a dark orange or red color to me, but it's quite bare. It's not as thick as, for instance, on this left-hand side. And so in that instance, I'm going to press a little lighter and just do smaller marks. So you just got to kind of notice, you know, where the small marks are. And I'm still not using the tip of my pastel because I don't want to make it a hard mark. So if I keep it still on its side and tilt it a little bit, I'm still getting a nice soft mark, and it's not too hard. So, you know, and then in towards the middle, you can kind of make your marks wider, or use the whole side of the pastel rather than just the end. So different marks will have different effects, and it's all about figuring out, you know, what you need to do on which part. So on the outside of the bottom right area there, all those leaves, there's less of them again underneath hanging down, but they're kind of darker. So I'm going to get some of this orange in, but then I'm probably going to come back in, I'm thinking, with some brown, just to darken them off a little bit, because I really want the light parts to pop. And to make light pop, you've got to have dark. What's that saying? You don't know the light till you see the darkness or something. So I'm really liking the look of that. I'm going to get some orange over on the other side too. And again, I forgot to twist my pastel around. Try to twist it around and get some different shapes. And then as we move forward and start to get more tone, and so by tone I mean the light and the dark and the mid, all the different tone, then we'll start to press a bit harder and make stronger marks. So that's then going to give us more definition. But we're just going softly, softly. Just press softly. We don't want to go too hard too soon. We've got to kind of build up to it and build the foliage. Get it lovely and thick and lush. Okay, so that's coming along. Put a bit more down in here. All right. So what we just need to be aware of, I guess, or keep thinking about, where is the light, you know, on this. And so the light is on the left side and a little bit up in here where these bits of leaves must be poking out and catching the light. But down here on the right, it's a bit darker, isn't it? So like I just said before, I think I want to pop a bit of brown in there, and possibly, definitely, actually, some purple. So I'm just going to put a bit of brown through here, just because I want to make it a bit darker and create some shadow. So all of this side, to me, feels like it's in shadow a bit. So I'm smushing a bit of brown. This is also a longish stick of brown. And again, I'm tilting it to one end so that I just get that soft kind of mark on one end. Now, as we're doing this, we're kind of losing some of the branch marks that we put in the first place with the darkest pastel. So we can actually come back over and add some more branches in a minute. So that's working out nicely. I like those colours. Everyone's going to have different colours too. So if you don't have a brown like this, you might have a different brown. You can use blue or anything really. The most important thing to remember is to make sure you've got enough range of tone. So you could potentially do this whole thing in blue, but as long as you've got the light blue where it's lightest and the dark blue where it's darkest and the mid where it's mid, you'll be fine. So, you know, not everything is determined by colour alone. It's really important to consider the tones. I know I go on and on about it. It took me years to figure that out. Like, I just didn't get it. I did not get the tone thing. But now it's like, oh my goodness, yeah, all right, that all makes sense. So see how the brown has kind of muted down some of that, which is nice. That's what I want, because then we've got room to add the light. Remember, I always say save the white for last. It's the same kind of thing. Save the light for last. And I'm going to pick up purple. I know that might freak someone out, but popping some purple in through this darker side, and I know I'm going to put my branches back in a minute. See how the purple just gives it that beautiful shadow effect. It's just gorgeous. And it kind of mutes everything down. And when you zhoosh it around on top of the other colours, it just makes the loveliest browns and greys and beautiful, beautiful combinations. So I'm going to pop a fair bit of that, probably mostly on the right side, because that's where I can see that it's darkest, and around here in the centre, because it's more dense there. It's much thicker with the foliage. And maybe a bit up there. Can't help myself. And then just under here on the left middle section, there's shadow there. So why I'm putting the purple in there, because I want shadow in this bit in there. So when we put the light in this area, the shadow, the darkness of the shadow is going to make the lights feel brighter. So, as I said before, you can't have light without the dark. Cool. So that's enough purple. And while I've got purple in my hand, I'm going to stick a bit of it down here in the dirt on the grass as well, because that will kind of tie everything in and make them related. See, oh, that's beautiful, isn't it? The purple on there with the green is just yum. It just warms it up. It makes it a little bit darker, a little bit more mysterious, I think. Yeah, that's really nice. I'm always surprised by how colours kind of mix together. It's so exciting. I love it. All right, so if you're still doing that, then by all means carry on. What I'm going to do now is just put some of my branches back in, because we've smushed quite a lot of the leaves in now and we've lost a little bit of the branches, and I want to define those a little bit more, especially these low-hanging ones that seem to be a bit sparse. And so to do that, what I'm doing is broken lines, because I don't want to put a big black line right across all those leaves. So I want to put a broken line in there, which will then appear as if some of the leaves are on top, some are behind, and they all, you know, kind of layer. So when you're doing broken lines, the best way I find to do it is just to, again, get the edge of your pastel and roll it, and then lift and put down again. So you kind of lift it up and then you put it back down. Something like that, so that you just get this, you know, line that isn't completely continuous. Because if you do that, then you'll have to come back in and put more leaves over the top, which is fine. We can still do that, and we will. But I just want to get a little bit more definition of my branches in there, because they got lost. And I knew they would. They always do. But you've got to start with the bones, haven't you? You've got to kind of give yourself somewhere to begin with, to build on, and then keep kind of reinforcing it, I suppose. There we go. So that's all those little broken lines. So it's just looking like it's got all this beautiful foliage now. And in the center there, so in here in the middle bit, that's where it's kind of darkest, like we said at the beginning. We darkened all of that off because that's where all the branches kind of come from. So I'm darkening back in there again, just to get a bit more depth. And again, that's going to make all the light really pop. So I'm a lover of colour. I just love bright colours. I love all colours. I'm going to darken down the side of the tree on that right side and just really sharpen up that edge. So again, that'll give it more depth. I think it's leaning a little bit to the left, but never mind. Like people, they're never perfect, are they? They've got their little personalities and shapes and things. And again, I'm just gently tracing through some lines to make those branches extend out. So you can just kind of glimpse them through the leaves. And then we can pop more leaves on. So if you feel like you've got too much, you know, too many lines or branches going on, you can pop more leaves over the top. And vary the direction as well. So all these branches are kind of coming out from the middle, and then each main branch has other ones kind of sprouting off it. So you can think about the direction that they're falling into. Cool. Remember I said earlier that a couple of those branches have a little bit of light just on the top right there. I mean, yeah, it's not, and the middle one too, actually. I'm zooming in on it. So it's not super bright. So what can we do? Let's try, I might try a bit of terracotta. I don't know if this will be light enough. It might not be. Put a bit of that through there. No, it's not light enough. That didn't work. Just dab it in a bit and get rid of it. Get rid of that line. What else can we try? I feel like I need to go and get some cream or something a bit neutral. Let me see. All right, I've got a little apricot here. It's quite light. It's probably lighter than anything else I've used so far, but we'll see what happens. And so I'm just going to put that along the edge of that little branch there. And then there's another one up in here. Now, if that's too bright, we can mute it down. So, and to mute it down, I'm just going to dab it with my fingers so that it kind of merges into the leaves. It might be a bit much, but we'll see. The lovely thing is, you can always, mute things down or change them. So nothing you do is forever with pastels. If you have done watercolor, you'll know that once you've done it, that's it. You can't go back. But pastels, you can, and that's why I love it. It's so forgiving. So now I'm just dabbing with my finger. Dab, 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 to soften off those bright bits. Now that's not too bad because I've softened it off and pushed it in. So they're not going to dominate, but they're just going to give a little bit of a highlight. I'm just going to dot this around in here because I want to see what happens. See how that suddenly brings those little leaves forward, that bright bit that I just popped in. It's probably a bit too light, but that's okay. I can soften it off, but it suddenly brings those leaves towards us, and we can see that they're catching the light from over here. So they must be poking out more. Does that make sense? So it's amazing how much difference tone makes, or light and dark. So, just really take notice of that, because it has such a massive impact on your art, and it gives us form and direction and all those things. I'm just going to pop a bit of red over the top of that just to shush it up a bit. And I know I can come back with yellow and brighten that up again. See how red and that light colour kind of now have turned sort of a pinky muted colour. I'm not a fan of, like, because there's white in this colour, so this is an apricot colour, that's what I put down. Because there's a white in there, it makes everything opaque. And by opaque, I mean, you know, like you can't see through it. It's not transparent anymore. It's milky. Is a better word. And so when I add red over the top, it kind of goes pink and milky, and it's not as vibrant as a pure colour. So sometimes white isn't always the best option because it does milk stuff off a little bit. I'm going to keep going with this because it's fun. And I'm going to pop some yellow over that to kind of brighten it up a bit. That was just an experiment. You didn't have to do that. So put some yellow over it, and see how it's still milky? The yellow is kind of muted now because of that milky colour, or the white that's in the colour underneath. But I do enjoy how bright and delicious that looks. And I know I can still, you know, quieten it down. So let's pop a bit more before we go crazy with the lights. I can't help myself, just want to put it in here now. So let's do it. You can always sort it out afterwards, but what I want to do is try and brighten up this left side with some yellow. So I know it's a little bit dramatic and maybe might be too much for you if you're not into the brights. You can always mute it down with quieter colours, but I really like what's going on there. So what I'm doing is just wandering around here, finding some of the brighter leaves and things because they're the ones that are catching this light. And I'm just dotting now, so when you want to get a more defined mark and stronger colour, just dot it on there. I mean, that is way too bright, but it's exciting. Okay, I'm going to dot some of that over on this other side where I was before. And then I know I can come back over that. I'll probably come back over it with some terracotta or maybe a bit of green just to quieten it down a little bit. But it really highlights that light side, doesn't it? Let's try some orange. Did we do orange yet? No. Okay, so this is a lovely orange. Orange is a tricky colour. Sometimes it's really difficult to find a good orange. They're kind of always a bit muddy. So when you find one, hang on to it. Buy 6. So the orange I'm going to use mostly on this left side where the light's shining too, because I want that side to kind of glow more than the other side. This little stick is giving me, you know, sharp edges. I can't kind of get a dot unless I use the corner, and then they're too small. So I've got to be careful not to make hard lines. And it's very soft too. I'm just got to keep smushing that around. When you want more vibrant colour, just press a little bit harder and it stays, you know, more vibrant on the surface. As long as you've got a nice soft pastel. If it's a hard one, it might not work so well. So I like the way that that's kind of brightening up that side of my tree. Put a bit of that orange over here too on these ones. I think I've kind of killed that now. I have to come back in with some darks and bring it back to life. Okay. And as I said, we're dancing between colours. So now I'm going to pick up, what am I going to do? Red. A bit of red back in here. So the red is darker, and so that's kind of a nice muted sort of tone, and it can soften everything down a little bit. So see, as we're building this up, it's getting thicker and thicker and more lush. I'm actually going over some of those bright bits with the red just to shush it up a tiny bit. It's just beautiful. All these gorgeous colours. So as I'm doing that, it's almost like blending the colours in, but I'm using the pastel stick to do it. So if I put my fingers into this now and blended it, it would just all turn to mud, and you wouldn't be able to see, you know, the beautiful brights. It'd just all get really dirty and murky. So this is when you don't want to be doing that. You know, you've got to come to a point where you don't blend anymore, and you just let the pastels do the work. And pastels can actually blend really nicely just on their own. So by running my red over some of this, it's kind of, it gets this beautiful glaze. So if you're a oil painter, or if you've done oil painting, you'll know that you kind of glaze your layers of oil paints, and then you wait for it to dry, and then you put the next one on. You can see kind of through the top glaze down, you know, to what's underneath, and that's what creates all these beautiful translucent colours. And pastels are the same. So by doing this kind of thing, you can still see all those beautiful colours underneath that we put down before. You can still see glimpses of green and purple and orange, because we're not pushing it in too much. We're just letting it sit on top of each other, basically. And it's creating this really nice layering and transparency. And as we're building this up now, so we can start to, I'm just going to thicken up a couple of these branches. And so, yeah, if you lose some of your branches, just pop back in with your blue violet or your dark, and, you know, put them back in just here and there. Definitely a leaning tree today. So I could potentially make that stand up straighter. I might do that actually, just straighten up this left hand side. I'll put more light on there after. There we go, that looks better. Not falling over anymore. And yeah, so you still want to, you know, be able to see some of the tree trunk through the leaves and a few of the branches, bits and pieces. It kind of gives it more body. But you can see how those light sections are glowing now, and you can see that they're catching the light. It's lovely. All right, so back down to my tree trunk, because I made it chunkier. I've got to now lighten up that side. I'm going to use this yellow colour. It's a nice sunny, warm colour. Ooh, a bit bright. If it's a bit bright, just dab it in, soften it off. There we go. Don't blend it though. If you blend, you make mud. So just dab it and soften it. So, and now it's time to just kind of go, okay, what else do I need to put in here? Do I need a bit more green? Do I need to cover that branch up and break the line a little bit? So now you can start to kind of do a little bit more dotting or focused sort of marks if you want. If you like what you've got and you don't want to change it, then stick with it. I'm just popping a bit more green in here and there because I can see quite a bit of green, and I did have it in earlier, but it's disappeared under everything else mostly. I can still see some. And then we can pop some light back in these light sections. And so when we lighten up the light side, then the other side is going to automatically become darker. And that's what's so lovely. So I'm going to try this limey green actually, because I can see quite a lot of light green foliage through there. And if most of that is on the left side, here and there, then it's going to make that side glow more. It's really hot today for winter. Okay, so again, I'm just using the side of the pastel. I don't want hard, sharp dots or marks. I just want it to have soft, kind of gentle shapes. See how that's starting to kind of come alive now? Just going to put a few more leaves over the front of this here. In the middle. The red is a really good mid-tone. It's not too dark and it's not too light, so it's a good mid. And then a bit more green in there too, just to bring some of that forward. There we go, that's better. And then putting a little bit of that down through here. Just in front of the tree trunk there at the top of the top of the tree trunk. You can see there's a few little leaves in here are hanging down. So that just breaks that line up a little bit and makes it more interesting. How fun is this, playing with all this colour? Okay, and now if you want to put in the final bits of light, so it looks like it's glowing in the dark, I love it. But if we want to really get a bit more light on this side, and see these ones just under here, these little leaves that hang under here, there's a few bright ones in there. So I'm going to go for yellow. It's a bit dramatic, I know, but let's have a crack at it. So if I'm going to put a few little light leaves down here, because they're hanging lower, so they're catching the light that's over on my left. And then there's a few poking out around here as well. So put a bit of that yellow in there. Wow, that was really bright, wasn't it? And so to do this, I'm just using kind of the tip of the pastels to get like a harder mark and pressing a bit harder here and there just to get a really strong, bright effect. So I can see now that the sun's catching the edge of those little leaves and really making them shine. And I'm going to put a few more just over on this right hand side because those bits are poking out and catching the light too. Cool. And then I might pop a bit of that yellow just down here in the grass where the sun's catching it, just to get some more bright in there. A bit more drama. You want drama in your art, not in your life. There we go. So we're just about done, I think. I want to just brighten up a little bit in the middle here. It's looking a bit kind of dark. Just bring some of those leaves forward in here. Because remember, this is a round thing. It's solid, so it's not two sides. It's a round, solid thing. And so there are leaves coming towards us as well as off to the edges and around the back. So I want to make sure I get it to look like that. A bit more purple in there. Purple and orange are yummy together. Beautiful. And that's given me a nice feeling of foliage, I guess, through here. And if you want to get more dark in then there, you know, why not? Just literally just smush a bit more dark. I'm going to just wipe this blue violet very, very lightly, but over on the right side, because I just want to darken that off a bit more. Told you I love drama in my art. Okay. There. That looks pretty effective, doesn't it? So I'm going to finish up there and wait a couple of minutes and let everyone kind of get ready to hold up your painting on the screen. If you're watching this video, I hope you've enjoyed it. Feel free to keep adding some colours and building it up even more if you want to. Try other colours, be brave, don't be afraid. And I think there's one I didn't try, and that was this pinky colour, because again I feel it's a little bit muted because it's white in it. It's quite nice actually. You've probably figured out by now that I love my brights. That is nice. And so remember though that you'll get to a point where you can't get any more pastel onto the page, so you do need to stop at some point and put it away, because it can, even if you're not blending in this in with your fingers, it can still get really kind of muddy if you just keep doing this and keep, you know, adding, and and then you're just sad because it doesn't work out. So you've got to kind of know when to stop, and sometimes it's harder. It's hard to stop. So don't forget to sign your artwork also. And I like to use my white charcoal pencil if I'm doing a white signature. I just find that I don't know why, but it sort of stays on better than the pastel pencil. So a white charcoal or white pastel, whatever. And you just copy your name on there like that. And then you can sell that for $1 million. Shouldn't have picked up the white. Now I want to put white everywhere. Stop it. Okay, so I'm going to finish up there. Thanks for coming. If you've been doing the video, I hope you enjoyed it. Please send me a photo of your artwork. I would love to see that. And we'll go back over to the other screen in a minute. Just got to take this grid mark out. So that's the other thing. If you want to tidy up your page, you can just remove your white marks and let the background sit like that. Or if you want to pop the background in, because you do have that information in your image, then feel free to have a go at that. Although I would advise trying to do it first rather than after, because otherwise you've got to get in behind all this stuff, which is not impossible, but it will be interesting. All right. See you next time.